Where Good Ideas Come From, The Natural History of Innovation by Steven Johnson. Picture this. It's the late 1870s in Paris, and a doctor named Stéphane Tarnier is having what should be just another ordinary stroll through the zoo. But Tarnier isn't having an ordinary day at all. As an obstetrician working with the city's poorest families, he's haunted by a problem he can't solve. Too many babies, especially the tiny ones born too early, are simply slipping away. The mortality rate is heartbreaking. He's walking past the usual zoo attractions when something completely unexpected stops him cold. Not a lion, not an exotic bird, a heated box, a chicken egg incubator. Now here's where it gets interesting. Standing there, watching these fragile little chicks chirping away under the gentle warmth of this machine, something clicks in Tarnier's mind. It's one of those moments where two completely unrelated things suddenly connect. He thinks about those premature babies at his hospital, struggling to survive. What if we could give them the same care we give to baby chickens? So he does something a bit wild. He hires the zoo's poultry guy to build him a human version. Nothing fancy, just a wooden box warmed by hot water bottles underneath. When he tests it out, the results blow everyone away. He cuts the death rate for underweight babies in half. Just by keeping them warm. A chicken incubator just became a lifesaver for human babies. But wait, the story takes another turn. Fast forward 100 years, the developing world is still losing babies at devastating rates. Well-meaning organizations ship over these high-tech incubators worth $40,000 each. Sounds great, right? Except here's the problem. These sophisticated machines break down in humid climates with spotty electricity. And then they just sit there, useless, because there's no one trained to fix them and no spare parts to be found. An MIT professor sees this mess firsthand during a trip to Indonesia. 8 expensive incubators, all broken, gathering dust. The same tragedy Tarnier fought against, still happening. Then he and his team ask themselves a brilliantly simple question. What's the one complicated piece of technology that even the smallest villages somehow manage to keep running? Cars, specifically Toyota 4Runners. So they build an incubator out of car parts. Headlights provide the heat. Dashboard fans circulate air. A door chime serves as the alarm. You can power the whole thing with a motorcycle battery. The genius move here isn't just the device itself. It's realizing you don't need a specialized medical technician to fix it anymore. Any mechanic who can replace a headlight can now save a baby's life. These two stories, separated by a century, reveal something profound about how innovation actually works. Good ideas don't just pop into existence, fully formed like some gift from the universe. They're cobbled together, built from whatever spare parts happen to be lying around at the time. Steven Johnson's book takes us on this fascinating journey to uncover the hidden patterns behind innovation. He shows us that the environments that breed creativity, whether it's a coral reef, a bustling city, or the early internet, all share some common DNA. By the end of this, you'll understand these 7 patterns. You'll see that a good idea isn't really a thing at all. It's a network. It's not a lightning bolt. It's a slow burn. And you'll learn how to build your own creative environments to cultivate hunches, connect the dots, and bring your own ideas to life. We love to romanticize our breakthroughs, don't we? We talk about light bulb moments and strokes of genius, as if ideas just drop from the sky fully formed. But that car part incubator tells a different story. Ideas are limited by the parts and skills we have available. That revolutionary incubator wasn't some $40,000 machine from a factory. It was built by tinkering with what was already there. A scientist named Stuart Kauffman gave this concept a name, the adjacent possible. Think of it this way. You're standing in a room with 4 doors. Those 4 doors are your adjacent possible. They're all the new things you can create from where you are right now. You can't magically teleport to some room 10 doors down the hall. You can only open the doors next to you. But here's where it gets cool. Once you open one door and step into that next room, you suddenly see new doors you couldn't even imagine before. The adjacent possible is basically a map of all the ways the present can reinvent itself, and the beautiful weird thing is that it actually grows as you explore it. Each new combination of ideas opens up doors to even more combinations. Go back 4 billion years. A carbon atom back then had pretty limited options. It could bond with a few other elements floating around in the primordial soup to make simple molecules. It definitely couldn't spontaneously create a sunflower. That would require chloroplasts, genetic code, vascular tissue, all kinds of stuff that simply didn't exist yet. Not in the adjacent room, anyway. But once those basic molecules formed the first cell membranes, boom, a new door opened. Suddenly you had an inside and an outside. You could store stuff. This eventually led to genetic code, to photosynthesis, and billions of years later, to actual sunflowers. This is how all innovation works, whether in nature or culture. It's this slow, relentless exploration of the adjacent possible, one door at a time. This explains why so many great ideas seem to be floating around at the same time. In 1611, 4 different scientists in 4 different countries all discovered sunspots simultaneously. The telephone, the steam engine, evolution, almost every major breakthrough has what historians call a multiple, another person who arrived at the same idea independently. This isn't some mystical cosmic coincidence. It's because the pieces needed to make that idea, the conceptual parts and physical tools, had finally entered the adjacent possible. The doors were finally there, waiting. Sometimes a mind jumps too far ahead. Charles Babbage designed his analytical engine in the 1830s, the world's first programmable computer. It had everything: a processor, memory, software via punch cards. Brilliant idea. Total failure. Why? Because he was way outside the adjacent possible. He was trying to build an electronic age machine in a steam-powered world. He had the wrong spare parts. He needed vacuum tubes, but all he had were clanking metal gears. His idea was, as they say, ahead of its time. Contrast that with YouTube in 2005. It exploded in less than 2 years. If they'd tried to build the exact same site in 1995, it would have been a spectacular disaster. The adjacent possible of 1995 didn't include widespread high-speed internet or the flash video platform they built on. They had the right idea at the right time with the right parts available. So the trick is figuring out how to explore the edges of what's possible around you. And step 1 is placing yourself in the right environment, what Stephen Johnson calls a liquid network. Think about the 3 states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. In a gas, molecules are flying around like maniacs. New connections form constantly, but they tear apart just as fast. Too much chaos for anything stable to emerge. In a solid, molecules are locked in place. The patterns are stable, sure, but they can't change. Too much order. A liquid hits the sweet spot. It's dense. Molecules bump into each other constantly, forming new random connections. But it's not so crazy that it instantly destroys what it creates. It's the perfect environment for exploring the adjacent possible. The primordial soup where life began was a liquid network. Carbon atoms swirling in water, colliding with other elements until they stumbled on stable combinations that eventually became life. Your brain is also a liquid network. 100 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others, constantly forming and reforming new patterns. A new idea is literally a new network of neurons firing together for the first time. This pattern scales up too. The first huge explosion of human innovation happened when we settled into cities. For millennia, we lived as hunter-gatherers, in small, scattered bands, the cultural equivalent of a gas. Ideas would spark but often die out, lost to the small, disconnected group. But in the first cities, thousands of minds suddenly crowded together. Ideas could flow from person to person, spill over from one trade to another. New forms of collaboration became possible. In the dense liquid network of a city, a good idea had a natural tendency to find another mind, to connect, to be preserved, to be built on. This is why cities are what scientists call superlinear in creativity. A city 10 times larger than its neighbor isn't 10 times more innovative. It's 17 times more innovative. The average person in a city of 5 million is almost 3 times more creative than someone in a town of 100,000. Not because the network itself is smart, but because individuals within it get smarter by being connected. We see this in the coffee houses of the Enlightenment, where thinkers from different fields gathered and sparked new ideas in science, politics, finance. We see it in research labs, where breakthroughs happen not at isolated microscopes but around conference tables where researchers share findings. We see it today in how innovative companies design their offices. They build around common spaces, mixer stations, writable walls. They literally design the water coolers first, then build an office around them. They get that information spillover isn't a bug, it's a feature. Good ideas need to leak. But what's the nature of these ideas flowing through liquid networks? Are they fully formed thunderbolts of insight? Rarely. More often, a great idea enters the world as a slow hunch. It starts as a vague, nagging feeling. A sense that there's an interesting problem to solve or a new path to explore. But the full picture is missing. These hunches can lurk in the back of your mind for years, even decades. They're fragile, easily forgotten in daily life. This is where the Eureka moment myth falls apart. We love the story of the apple falling on Newton's head, but reality is almost always messier and slower. Take Charles Darwin. In his autobiography, he famously described his insight into natural selection as a sudden epiphany while reading Thomas Malthus in October 1838. Great story. Not quite true. When historian Howard Gruber studied Darwin's private notebooks from that period, he found something fascinating. All the core elements of Darwin's theory, variation, inheritance, the struggle for existence, were already there months, even a year before his supposed Malthusian moment. He had passages where he essentially described the entire theory. But he couldn't quite see it. The idea was in his head, but he was incapable of fully thinking it. Still, just a hunch. The idea didn't arrive in a flash. It drifted into his consciousness over time, in waves. A slow hunch, incubating for years, fed by his observations on the beagle, breeding pigeons, geological studies. Most great ideas take this path. They need time to mature. The challenge is keeping them alive. Darwin's secret weapon was keeping meticulous notebooks. He wrote everything down. Constantly reread his old notes, letting past observations collide with present thoughts. His notebooks weren't just a record of ideas. They were the environment where his ideas evolved. This practice, keeping a commonplace book, was huge during the Enlightenment. John Locke, Francis Bacon, Benjamin Franklin, all devoted commonplacers. They understood that to cultivate a slow hunch, you need to give it a home. A place to be stored and revisited. A place where it can wait for the missing piece. Because a hunch is incomplete by nature. And more often than not, the missing piece isn't something you'll come up with on your own. It's living as another hunch in someone else's head. This is why liquid networks matter so much. They're basically a dating service for promising hunches. Think about the Phoenix memo, the now legendary warning sent by an FBI agent in Arizona 2 months before 9/11. Agent Ken Williams noticed a suspicious pattern. Way too many men with ties to radical groups enrolling in flight schools. Brilliant prophetic hunch, but incomplete. He thought they were planning long-term infiltration of the airline industry, not an immediate attack. His memo went to headquarters, got labeled speculative, dropped into a bureaucratic black hole. A month later in Minnesota, another hunch emerged. Flight instructors at a Pan Am Academy got deeply suspicious of a student named Zacarias Moussaoui. Paid in cash, had zero interest in learning to land a plane, obsessed with cockpit doors. The instructors called the FBI. Minneapolis agents quickly believed Moussaoui was part of a plot to fly a plane into the World Trade Center. Their superiors dismissed it as a hunch. Alone, each was just a hunch. But imagine if those two hunches connected. the pattern from Phoenix, and the specific suspect in Minnesota. Together, they would have amplified each other's significance, providing more than enough to get a warrant, search Moussaoui's laptop, potentially uncover the entire plot. The problem wasn't the hunches. The problem was the environment. The FBI's information system was a solid, not a liquid, locked file cabinets and need-to-know restrictions, designed to prevent information spillover. A hunch that doesn't connect is doomed to stay a hunch. So if we need our hunches to connect, how do we create those connections? Sometimes by design, building coffeehouses or open offices. But often, the most transformative connections are the ones we don't see coming. They arrive through serendipity. The word was coined by Horace Walpole in 1754 from a Persian fairy tale about three princes always making discoveries by accident and sagacity of things they weren't looking for. Serendipity isn't just random luck. It's the happy accident of finding the missing piece to a puzzle you've been working on forever. The unexpected connection that completes a slow hunch. Our brains are masters of serendipity, especially when we let them wander. The dreaming brain is a primordial soup of ideas. During REM sleep, our brain fires signals in chaotic, semi-random fashion, triggering memories and associations. Most of it's nonsense. But occasionally, the dreaming brain stumbles across a connection that eluded our waking logical mind. German chemist Friedrich Kekulé struggled for years to understand the structure of the benzene molecule. One day in 1865, dozing by the fire, he had a vision of a serpent swallowing its own tail, the ancient Ouroboros symbol. Flash of insight. The benzene molecule was a closed ring. He needed that unlikely connection, a spark from ancient mythology, to solve a modern chemistry problem. We can cultivate this private serendipity. Long walks or showers often lead to breakthroughs because they remove us from task-based focus and let our minds enter a more associative state. Bill Gates is famous for his think weeks, going into seclusion with stacks of books on wildly different topics. By compressing his reading into a short period, he creates an environment where ideas from different fields collide and spark new connections. But what happens when those connections are based on a mistake? When we're just plain wrong? Our instinct is to dismiss error, correct it, seek pure, accurate information. Turns out error is one of the most powerful engines of innovation. Being right keeps you in place. Being wrong forces you to explore. When scientists' experiments produce unexpected results, their first instinct is often to assume something went wrong, contamination, mechanical failure. They assume noise, not signal, but often that noise is where the breakthrough lives. Lee DeForest was an aspiring inventor at the turn of the 20th century. One night in his Chicago apartment, experimenting with a spark gap transmitter, he noticed a gas lamp across the room flickering. When he activated his machine, the flames suddenly flared up, changing from red to white. He became convinced he'd discovered a new way to detect radio waves using gas. This became the slow hunch that obsessed him for years. He tinkered endlessly with gas-filled glass bulbs, eventually adding a third electrode, a bent piece of wire he called the grid. The device he created, the Audion, was a phenomenal amplifier of audio signals. It became the vacuum tube, the invention that made radio, television, and the first digital computers possible. Changed the world. But here's the kicker. DeForest was wrong about almost everything. The flame in his apartment wasn't reacting to radio waves, it was reacting to the sound of his machine. His insistence on using gas in his tubes actually made them less reliable. It took other researchers a decade to realize the device worked far better in a true vacuum. DeForest himself admitted, "I didn't know why it worked. It just did." The Audion wasn't so much an invention as a steady, persistent accumulation of error. DeForest's mistake didn't stop him. It created a new path to explore. His error opened a door in the adjacent possible that a more correct approach might have missed. The history of science is packed with these generative mistakes. Penicillin, the pacemaker, daguerreotype photography, all came from accidents, contaminations, errors. a wrong resistor, a moldy petri dish, spilled mercury. Even nature relies on error. Evolution is powered by mutation, random errors in DNA replication. Most mutations are harmful or do nothing. But occasionally, a mistake opens up a new possibility. Error is what made us possible in the first place. This is why innovative environments are always a little noisy, a little contaminated. When a group is exposed to a dissenting, even incorrect opinion, the group as a whole becomes more creative. The error forces them to question assumptions and explore new perspectives. Too much order, too much correctness can be sterile. Sometimes a tool developed for one purpose gets hijacked for something completely new. This is the power of exaptation. Evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould first used the term to describe a trait that evolves for one function but later gets co-opted for something else. Classic example: bird feathers. Feathers first evolved not for flight but for temperature regulation, keeping small dinosaurs warm. But when bird ancestors started experimenting with gliding, those feathers turned out incredibly useful for controlling airflow. A trait adapted for warmth was exapted for flight. This principle is everywhere in human creativity. Johannes Gutenberg wasn't a winemaker, he was a goldsmith and entrepreneur. But he lived in the Rhineland region of Germany, where in the 1400s, wine presses were everywhere. To solve the problem of mass-producing texts with his movable type, he didn't invent a new machine from scratch. He borrowed mature technology from an entirely different field. Took a machine designed to get people drunk and exapted it into an engine for mass communication. Cities and liquid networks are ripe for exaptation. They create environments where different professions, subcultures, and idea spaces overlap. An architect might get an idea from a conversation with a musician in a coffeehouse. A programmer might borrow a metaphor from biology. Brian Eno, living in New York in the late 70s, started taping chaotic voices of AM radio preachers and talk show hosts. Took those spoken words designed to save souls or sell products and exapted them into music, creating the groundbreaking album My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, and pioneering vocal sampling that would define hip-hop and electronic music for decades. Chance favors the connected mind, but it particularly favors a mind connected to different kinds of minds. The most creative people consistently have broad social networks extending outside their primary field. They build bridges between different idea spaces, allowing them to import and repurpose tools and concepts. When an innovation is so successful, it creates a foundation for countless other innovations to build on. It becomes a platform. A coral reef is a platform. Coral polyps aren't trying to build an underwater metropolis, they're just building their own tiny calcium skeletons. But, over millennia, those skeletons accumulate, creating a massive structure, a platform, providing habitat for millions of other species. The reef doesn't just open a door in the adjacent possible, it builds an entire new floor. In 1957, two young physicists at Johns Hopkins heard the Soviets launched Sputnik. On a hunch, they pointed a receiver at the sky and picked up its faint beeping signal. As they tracked it, they realized they could use the Doppler effect, the way the signal's pitch changed as the satellite moved, to calculate its exact orbit. Brilliant hack. A few months later, their boss called them in with a question: if you can determine a satellite's position from a known location on the ground, could you do the reverse? Could you determine your location on the ground from a known satellite's position? Answer was yes. That idea, that inverse problem, became the global positioning system. The military developed it to track nuclear submarines. They created a platform. But they had no idea what other innovations would be built on it. They weren't thinking about teenagers playing games in city parks, farmers optimizing crop yields, or you finding the nearest coffee shop with your phone. The most generative platforms come in stacks. Tim Berners-Lee could invent the World Wide Web because he could build on the existing platform of the Internet. YouTube founders could build their service because they could build on platforms of the web, Flash video, and JavaScript. When you have stacked open platforms, you don't have to reinvent everything from scratch. You can focus on adding your own layer of innovation. The songbird doesn't need to know how to fell a tree or drill a hole. It just needs an abandoned woodpecker's nest to build its own home. This brings us to the most provocative idea in the book. Stephen Johnson asks us to imagine a grid with 4 quadrants. On one axis, individual versus network. Was the innovation created by a lone inventor or a large distributed group? On the other axis, market versus non-market. Was the innovator motivated by profit, or did they create it to be shared freely? The classic innovation story, the Willis Carrier air conditioning story, lives in Quadrant 1, the lone inventor driven by the market. We've long assumed this quadrant is the primary engine of progress. But when you plot 200 of the most important innovations since 1400 on this grid, a surprising picture emerges. Quadrant 1 is actually the least populated. And over the last 2 centuries, there's been an explosion of activity in Quadrant 4, the non-market networked quadrant. This is the world of academia, open-source software, the Internet itself, environments where ideas are shared freely, built upon, remixed. They lack the powerful incentive of a huge financial payday, but what they lack in profit motive, they make up for in connectivity. Fourth quadrant environments are the ultimate liquid networks, designed for serendipity, for exaptation, for slow incubation of hunches. They don't have to build walls to protect ideas, so they can focus on making connections. The promise of profit is powerful, but it also creates secrecy and restrictions that can suffocate the very patterns leading to breakthrough ideas. The story of the modern world isn't just the story of the market. It's also the story of the commons, the tangled bank, the coral reef. Open networks create platforms on which commercial enterprise can thrive. The Internet, a fourth quadrant creation, became the platform for trillions of dollars of first quadrant commerce. Good ideas aren't something we command into being. They're not the product of a single brilliant mind. They're the product of an environment that allows them to connect. As we close the pages of this book, what stays with me is this profound sense of relief. Relief from the pressure of the Eureka moment. The idea that we have to be solitary geniuses waiting for lightning bolts of inspiration isn't just wrong, it's paralyzing. Stephen Johnson gives us a more generous, more human, and ultimately more achievable path to creativity. He tells us innovation isn't an act of solitary creation, but an act of connection. It's about cultivating, nurturing, and connecting ideas, both our own and others. The great innovators, from Darwin to the creators of the web, weren't necessarily the smartest people in the room. They were the best at creating and navigating networks that allowed ideas to flourish. The most powerful lesson, I think, is that we can shape our own creative environments. We can't always control the big picture, the structure of our economy or organization. But we can control the spaces of our own lives. We can build our own personal coral reefs. So how can we start doing this today? Here are a few simple, practical actions inspired by the book. First, start a commonplace book. Doesn't have to be a leather-bound journal like Darwin's. Could be a simple text file on your computer, a notes app on your phone, or a dedicated program like Think, which the author uses. The tool doesn't matter, the habit does. Whenever you read something interesting, have a fleeting idea, hear a quote that resonates, write it down. This isn't just about storing information. It's about giving your slow hunches a place to live, a place you can revisit, allowing them to connect with new ideas over time. Second, cultivate a diverse set of hobbies. The power of exaptation comes from borrowing ideas from different domains. If you're a programmer, take up painting. If you're a writer, learn about mycology. This slow multitasking, as Johnson calls it, creates a mental environment where ideas from one field can unexpectedly solve a problem in another. It forces your mind to move through multiple boxes, not just think outside of one. And third, build your own coffeehouse. Intentionally seek out and spend time with people who aren't like you, people with different expertise and passions. Don't just network with people in your industry. Have lunch with the historian, the artist, the mechanic. Create a liquid network in your own life where information and ideas can spill over. Ask them what they're working on. Share your own half-baked hunches. you never know where the missing piece of your idea might be hiding. In the end, this book is an invitation. It invites us to see the world not as a collection of finished objects, but as a space of infinite creative possibility. It reminds us that every idea is a network, and that we're all nodes in that network, with the power to receive, transmit, and connect. That was a summary of Where Good Ideas Come From, by Steven Johnson. We've touched on the major themes today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful city. It can show you the layout, the key landmarks, but it can never replace the feeling of walking those streets yourself. The real magic of this book is in the rich details of the stories, the way a simple concept unfolds through a dozen fascinating examples. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, I urge you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning where good ideas come from. It's an experience that will fundamentally change how you think about your own capacity to create. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring the essential books that shape the minds of the world's most successful people, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.